Come in, if you dare. Welcome to a world of the fantastic and the macabre. Welcome to Ghost Stories YYC. Prepare yourself for a tale of terror. Written by Aidan Vair. With art by Aidan Vair.
Memoriam to the Vengeful Guardian of a Stagnant Pond. It's June 13th, 2021. I know I haven't written in this diary in a long time. I'm such a sucker for buying a pretty notebook, thinking I'm going to start journaling regularly, and then it sits on a shelf, gathering dust with every other hobby I've failed to pick up. Oh well. I'm back now to finally acknowledge a memory that's been in the back of my mind since this day a decade ago. Most of the time it sits in my subconscious and subtly influences the things I do day to day, like the way ancient microwave radiation from the Big Bang sneaks into radio transmissions and causes static. Some days it's louder than others, like today. The weather then was the same as it is today, and it always triggers the memory. Overcast and cold, without rain. Strange for mid-June. I was in 11th grade at the time, so I had gotten off school and was sitting on the family computer, mindlessly scrolling through Facebook, probably avoiding some studying I needed to do. I noticed a few messages from... Should I write his name? I guess I'll call him S. S was in my communications class, but I didn't really know him all that well. I hung around a few guys who sort of talked to him, although when I think about it, they tolerated him more than anything. He must have found me on Facebook through one of them. S said he was working on a comic or something, maybe for a class, or maybe just a lie he made up as an excuse to talk to me. I'm not sure. In any case, he said he liked my art style and wanted some advice. I knew he lived a few blocks away from me because we took the same bus to school, so I suggested we meet up at the gas station across the street from my house. He told me to bring my sketchbook. Slimeball. I'm not sure what made me decide to go. Maybe I was desperate for positive attention, and I liked that somebody was showing interest in something I did. Maybe I was just really naive, thinking a straight teenage boy would really message a sad emo kid out of the blue because he genuinely wanted art advice. Or maybe I just had no care for my own safety at this point. Regardless of the reason, I threw on a jacket and headed out without telling anybody where I was going. I underestimated how cold it was. The wind cut through my light jacket as I sat on the curb waiting until S showed up. We made small talk. I'm not sure what about. It's not really important. Eventually we started to walk and ended up at the park near an elementary school that I walked past from time to time. It was kind of an unusual park. After you passed the soccer field and baseball diamond, you reached a huge, steep hill with a washroom built into the slope like the world's dirtiest hobbit hole, facing a man-made pond. In the winter, kids would toboggan down the hill onto the frozen surface, but during the rest of the year most people steered clear as the pond water became stagnant, and the slime that accumulated on the rocks took on a fetid, rotting smell. As you walked the path around the edge, you would have to dodge swarms of sandflies at your head, and greenish-black goose droppings at your feet. S and I climbed the side of the hill, and by then the wind had kicked up considerably. I remember holding my sketchbook tightly to my chest as if it would keep some heat in my body. I noticed the park was empty today, except for us, probably due to the bad weather. We stopped on the roof of the washroom that jutted out from the hillside, and only then did I start to see the red flags. I knew nothing about this guy. Why did we end up here, looking out at the noxious water? S pointed at a clump of trees to the left of us, past the base of the hill. People do heroin under there, he said. I've seen the needles they leave behind. They shoot up and they fuck and they leave. Huh. This had quickly become uncomfortable, and my mind started racing, looking for any excuse to leave, The wind was now gusting so strong I was sure there was a storm coming. But before I could say anything, S spoke again, turning to look down at me. "You know, I think you're really beautiful." Of course. Of course that's what this was about. My stomach churned. S reached out his hand to move a strand of my hair that had blown in front of my face. I froze in place. His fingers brushing across my wind-blasted skin felt sickeningly hot. He was now so close. I could feel his rancid breath creeping onto my forehead. I suppressed the urge to dry heave when I realized that he was leaning in to put his crusty lips on mine. I was trapped. There were no witnesses, and he was at least a foot taller than me, definitely heavier and stronger. Never before had I felt so weak and so powerless. I felt stupid. I should have known he wasn't interested in my art. He hadn't even mentioned it. I shouldn't have let him lead me there. I shouldn't have left my house or even answered that message. S stopped above my face, and there came the dampness of his hot breath across my cheeks again. "You know, my family isn't home right now. You could come back to my house with me, to my basement." "I don't go to people's houses." I closed my eyes and squeezed my sketchbook tighter, trying to disconnect my body from all physical sensation except the blasting wind stinging my ears. I remember praying that he would just do whatever it was he was planning to do quickly and let me leave. But that didn't happen. S loomed over me in the gray, desolate park, but his nasty mouth stopped just short of mine. His grasping, pathetic hands reached towards me but never got past the barrier of my paper-thin jacket. Instead, the strongest gust of wind I'd ever experienced swept up from behind him, blowing me back enough to evade S's touch. My eyes opened wide now, and I was shocked to see him completely frozen in place as I had been moments before. He seemed to be straining against some force neither of us could see. His eyes shot left to right, wild and panicked, struggling like a rodent caught in a glue trap. Since his back was facing the pond, he couldn't see what I saw over the edge of the guardrail. A dark, goopy mass rising out from that heinous water. The thing was almost human. The skin of its face was tight across its bones, almost mummified, and sticky black sludge dripped from the top of its head, which at first appeared like hair, but as it rose I could see the tendrils merging into its body in a writhing mixture of algae, mud, and dark water. The stagnant smell that hung in the air was so strong now it was suffocating. The air swirled and pushed it forward toward the edge of the washroom roof where S still stood, straining weakly against his petrified body. I wanted to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away, even as they became dry and watery. As I watched the creature ascend to its full 2-story height, towering behind S, I was sure in that moment that it was the end. From somewhere within the liquid filth that made up its body, an arm-like tendril emerged. S's beady eyes shot upward as he desperately tried to see what could possibly be more terrifying than his own evil intentions, then shot back down as the thick tentacle of matted filth coiled around his throat. When it had slithered to the other side, the creature lurched back, its limb quickly tightened. S's face went white, and the air became still. I swayed, then regained my balance, not realizing how much my body had been fighting to stay upright against the blast. The sludgy hair of the creature was moving less wildly, and I was able to look up into her face. From afar I couldn't tell, but now I somehow knew. This was a young woman in life. Her features were contorted over her bones, like oiled leather stretched over a wooden frame, and yet I saw a powerful spirit between the slits of her closed eyelids. The urge to ask who she was overcame my shock, but I don't remember if I was able to get the words out or not. It didn't matter, though, because the answer was projected directly into my mind in a series of flashing images. A woman with long dark hair, standing where I stood now, another, larger, taller man, leering down at her. The dark space under the group of trees. A body laying face down in the pond. In an instant, I understood. The creature tightened her grip on S's throat in response. I finally managed to speak. That was you. Before. Yes. And you're here because I pointed at S. He was going to. He was. The thought made acid creep up my throat again. I stared into the silent woman's lifeless face, her ropey appendages still snaking around S's neck. This was her purpose. She had halted the progression of events and given control back to me. What an incredible power to hold on to the righteous anger of that terrible trauma and wield it to prevent the same thing from being repeated here again. While my fear remained, I recognized my own underlying reverence for her. She had given me an invaluable gift that I would not take lightly. I dug the soles of my shoes into the ground and looked S directly in the eyes. The weight of the putrid water on his neck caused his knees to buckle and dragged him down to my height. I could see him pleading with me wordlessly. It was laughable that I was afraid of him. He was an insecure coward, and compensated for that by dominating others he saw as vulnerable. Now that he was in the position of his victims, he expected mercy, but I had none to offer. So long, fucker. The wind erupted again. This time a powerful gust from behind me. The creature plunged back into the deepest spot of the pond, dragging him by his throat. I saw the whites of S's eyes for a split second before the tendril noose yanked him backward. His fingers caught the edge of the guardrail and he was pulled over, but they were no match for the raw power he was fighting. I watched him land on his back and he began kicking as a sad last resort. His nails clawed futilely at the pavement, and then the grass, and finally the stones at the edge of the pond. One last tug, and S went limp, then disappeared into the whirlpool of algae. The sky and water churned, and the gale roared in my ears, then slowly faded away. I blinked twice, then snapped back to the present, rushing to the edge of the guardrail and peering at the spot where the creature had returned to. It had become still, aside from the flies skipping across the surface. I was safe. My sketchbook had fallen to the ground at some point in the commotion. I gathered it and walked home in a daze, went straight to my room, stripped off my clothes I was wearing and collapsed to the floor, shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. There was no way that could have been real, and yet it was. S was declared missing, and I don't think the body has been found to this day. No one asked and I didn't tell. What could I have possibly said? I just continued life for 10 years as if the memory didn't linger there at any given moment. Recently I returned to my hometown during a vacation. The bed I used to sleep on at my parents' house had long been replaced by a small hard mattress, which woke me up before dawn. I went for a walk with my camera to clear my head, and my feet led me to the edge of the pond again. Even though the sun was just peeking over the horizon, it was already heating up the air, and the dank, swampy smell quickly became overwhelming. I retreated to the edge of the park and tried to catch a hint of the creature I privately think of as the Vengeful Pond Woman. An older couple and their little white dog walked along the path, totally unaware of the weird energy this place held. Eventually the heat became too much, and I turned to go back, but not before silently projecting a message into the universe. I'm grateful I was given a chance to decide the course my life would take, so that I can carry a little piece of that power with me to fight for other victims. I know not everyone is so lucky. And that, dear diary, is the secret I've carried for a decade now. It feels good to put it into words, but I don't think I'll be writing here again. I think I can finally let this memory slowly fade and move forward with my life to a bright and hopeful future.